Before the prince's wedding, my sister lost her virtue. The mistress forced me, her lookalike, to take her place. On my childbirth night, she poisoned me, slashed my face, and stole my baby. I hate your face. I died, but she became princess. Now I'm reborn to that wedding night. Welcome to my channel. If you like this story, please click to subscribe. There are more wonderful stories waiting for you to listen to. Chapter 1. The eldest sister was granted a marriage decree by the emperor to the current regent prince. Unfortunately, she was no longer a maiden. She had secretly pledged herself to Zhao, the young master of the duke's household, and had even conceived his child. Thus, when the imperial decree arrived, she and the main wife panicked. That very night, they summoned me to my elder sister's boudoir. The matriarch threatened my mother's life, demanding I take my sister's place in consummating the marriage, even bearing a young heir for her. The reason was simple: I bore a striking resemblance to my elder sister. Meanwhile, my sister's body had long been damaged by the abortion potion. In my previous life, I naively believed that as long as I bore the young heir, they would spare me. They had promised that upon completing the task, they would give me and my mother 100 taels of gold and grant us a small residence outside the capital. I knew I had no choice but to survive. But on the very night I gave birth, while the prince was summoned to the capital by the emperor, my elder sister presented me with a cup of poisoned wine. She ordered her maidservant to pry open my mouth and personally force the poison down my throat. Watching me writhe in agony, she clapped her hands and laughed. Then, with a look of vicious cruelty, she took a dagger and slashed my face. Only when my face was a bloody, mangled mess, unrecognizable as human, did she stop. That night, her eyes were bloodshot, her voice laced with venom. I truly loathe this face of yours. Every time I see features resembling mine, it fills me with disgust. The prince will always be mine alone. Go in peace. Your mother will soon join you. The next moment, I awoke in the regent's mansion. The searing pain of the blade slicing through flesh still felt real. I frantically touched my face, smooth as ever. The gut-wrenching agony in my abdomen vanished without a trace. I lifted my veil and saw the familiar furnishings. Grabbing the mirror from the table, the bronze surface reflected a face strikingly similar to my elder sister, Gu Mingzhu. Outside, faint sounds of celebratory toasts drifted in. Only then did I realize I had been reborn. Before I could process it, a tall figure appeared in the doorway. The next moment, the door swung open. The regent rushed toward me. Stumbling slightly, the regent's power dominated the realm, with the young emperor and the empress dowager unfit for governance. State affairs were in disarray. As the late emperor's closest brother, the regent now guided the young heir in understanding court politics. The marriage between the Gu household and the regent had been arranged by the late emperor himself. The Gu family had rendered meritorious service to the late emperor by eliminating rivals during his ascension. My father, Gu Ningzhi, shielded the late emperor from an assassin's blade at a palace banquet. Severely wounded, he fell into a coma and ultimately perished. To honor the Gu family's loyalty, the late emperor specifically betrothed their eldest daughter, Gu Mingzhu, to the regent. Thus, among the imperial edicts left by the late emperor, this was one of them. The drunken regent prince froze upon seeing me. Only then did I realize my veil had slipped off in my panic. According to custom, this crimson veil should be removed by the husband himself. Now, clad in my wedding robes, I sat upon the bed, staring at him. Memories from my past life surged back like a raging tide. In that previous life, the prince treated me exceptionally well. He was a gentle and attentive man. After each intimate moment shared in bed, he would hold me tightly, never letting go all night long. But the next day, when my elder sister saw the red marks covering my body, I would face her furious wrath. Either she would make me kneel in punishment for a day, or she would deliberately twist my thigh with vicious intent. This spot was excruciatingly painful yet hidden and difficult to detect. Or else, she would slap me several times, leaving me to figure out how to reduce the swelling on my own. After all, she didn't want the prince to notice anything unusual about me. Such days were painful and oppressive. Yet compared to life in the Gu household, they were still far better. I was Gu Zi, the most inconspicuous concubine-born daughter in the Gu household. Both my elder sister and I bore a striking resemblance to our father, sharing 7 parts of his likeness. Alas, father died from severe injuries sustained while saving the late emperor. When he passed, I wept until I nearly fainted, for he had treated both me and mother with extraordinary kindness. In my memories, he especially loved teaching me to read and write. He said that when I was quiet, he could see his own childhood reflection in me. Father was kind to everyone, treating all in the household with warmth. Naturally, he was exceptionally good to Gu Mingzhu. That year at the Lantern Festival, father let Gu Mingzhu and me take turns riding on his shoulders. He even joked that this was our climbing high to see far, making us both laugh heartily. After father passed away, the mistress took charge of the household. Everything changed then. The Gu household lost its laughter and joy. Life for me and mother grew difficult. On the surface, it was because of my status as a concubine's daughter. But in truth, it was because the mistress disliked both me and my mother. The mistress's family and father's ancestral clan were old acquaintances. They had been betrothed since childhood. Father never imagined that the seemingly gentle woman harbored such scheming thoughts and treated servants with extreme harshness. Even in his lifetime, father had remarked that Madame's son was overly spoiled and willful. Gradually, his heart drifted away from her. Only in my mother's presence did father's face light up with genuine warmth. Out of respect for father, Madame's son initially dared not act harshly. But after father passed away, her vicious nature slowly came to the surface. Though Gu Mingzhu and I share a similar face, our lives are worlds apart. After father died, the mistress was especially harsh with our food, clothing, and daily necessities. Compared to the life of luxury enjoyed by my elder sister, the provisions for my mother and me in the Gu household were worse than those of the servants. Whenever she saw my face, the mistress would call me an ill omen, shooing me away and claiming I would bring bad luck to the legitimate daughter. That was the better outcome. If the legitimate daughter saw me, she would greet me with a smile. Then, with a nod to her maidservants, they would pin me down. Then she'd extend her nail-polished hand and twist the flesh of my thigh with brutal force. Even when I cried out in pain, she wouldn't stop. She said she was the Gu family's only daughter, and that my face resembling hers was an act of presumption. Little did I know they would one day need this very face of mine. That day, the mistress looked down on me from above, as if merely allowing me to speak with them was a favor. What followed left me utterly speechless. The mistress demanded I take my elder sister's place and consummate the marriage with the regent prince. My elder sister had been pregnant. If she entered the prince's household as a woman who was not a virgin, and the prince discovered it, it would be a capital offense. Before I could speak, the mistress invoked my mother, declaring she wouldn't survive a month if I refused this favor. Thus, I became my elder sister's shadow. I began residing in her side quarters, studying her every gesture and movement. When we had to appear together, to avoid suspicion, she veiled my face and presented me as her handmaiden. Gradually, my elder sister realized that with me around, she could more easily shift blame. Thus, I became her scapegoat. If she quarreled with some noble lady, it was I who would be beaten. As for studies, needlework, and etiquette all became my responsibility. However, I'd always been a quick learner, so none of this troubled me. Soon, I grew increasingly adept at playing the role of Gu Mingzhu. My speech and mannerisms became more and more like those of a proper young lady. By the end, when my elder sister and I wore identical clothes, even our mother couldn't tell us apart at a glance. Before long, the day of my marriage to the regent prince arrived. Regent Prince Shinzhanzi noticed my dazed expression and waved his hands before my eyes, snapping me back to reality. Seeing his cheeks flushed from the wine, I rose and gently began undressing him. His eyes never left me, the flickering candlelight casting an intimate glow. Soon, only his inner garment remained. His body stiffened abruptly. I covered my mouth with a handkerchief and giggled, feigning coyness. Watching his mesmerized gaze, I slowly removed each hairpin. A cascade of black silk spilled over my shoulders. Then, gathering my long hair in my hands, I wrapped it around his neck, gazing deeply into his eyes. I murmured, "My long hair binds your heart," woven into a knot of shared devotion. Then, unable to contain himself any longer, he swept me up in his arms and carried me to the bed. A deluge of kisses rained down upon me. Behind the beaded curtains, pink begonia blossoms trembled on the bed canopy throughout the night. Jade incense burners, ice-cool mattresses, and brocade quilts adorned with mandarin ducks, pink-tinged. Fragrant sweat flowed upon the mountain-shaped pillow. Soon, he held me close and fell into a deep sleep. Gazing at Shinzhanzi beside me, I rested my head against his chest, listening to his strong heartbeat as I sank into thought. In my past life, to survive, I willingly became their servant, toiling endlessly without complaint. And yet, in the end, I met a tragic death. I refused to accept it. Mother and I always lived by the rules, never crossing a single line. Mother's nature was too gentle. She believed that by yielding, the mistress would not provoke conflict. She forgot that the wicked have no limits to their cruelty. Beside me, Shinzhanzi breathed steadily. The flickering red candle cast dancing shadows, making his features appear even more exquisitely painted. My hand unconsciously brushed his cheek. His beauty was peerless, a rare sight in this world. A plan quietly took root. In this new life, I would never again be that Guzi, trampled upon by others. Since you forced me into the role of Gu Mingzhu, I would never relinquish this position. This title of princess consort, I would claim it for good. The next day, I discreetly had a servant from the mansion purchase a bottle of perfume for me. At the first light of dawn, Zhang Ma, the attendant by my elder sister's side, pretended to enter with water. She swiftly shot me a glance, signaling me to hurry. Taking advantage of Shinzhanzi turning over, I tiptoed off the bed and headed to the servants' quarters beside the room. The moment I entered, Ning'er, my elder sister's personal maid, immediately locked the door. Before me stood my elder sister, who hadn't slept all night. Her eyes were bloodshot, and dark circles hung heavy beneath them. Spotting me, she hurled a teacup directly at me. I deliberately didn't dodge. The teacup slammed hard against my shoulder. Ning'er rushed over to check. Sure enough, a large bruise formed. Gu Mingzhu stared at the bruise, glaring at me fiercely. Her icy voice rang out. "Kneel. Tell me exactly what happened last night. Not a single detail may be omitted. Otherwise, every time you return, you will kneel for a full day." I promptly obeyed and knelt, recounting everything from the previous night. The only thing I omitted was the poem I recited to the prince when my black hair wrapped around his neck. Just then, Zhang Ma behind me produced the wedding veil. A crimson bloodstain on it resembled a plum blossom. Her eyes blazed with fury upon seeing it. She snatched the veil and frantically searched the room for scissors, intent on shredding it to pieces. Just then, Zhang Ma hurriedly stopped her, pleading, "This is a precious treasure. You mustn't do that." Indeed, Hadn't she and her mother schemed for so long just for this veil in my womb? If she cut it, the trouble she'd face afterward would be immense. No matter how arrogant Gu Mingzhu was, she wouldn't dare toy with this. So she stopped, flinging the bridal veil back at Zhang Mama with utter disgust. Then, fixing her gaze on my face, she suddenly slapped me twice. I fell instantly, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth. In my past life, she'd been just as unpredictable. Seeing me say nothing, she grew even more furious, bending down to grip my chin. Gu Ziyi. I detest sharing anything with others. First it was father. Now it's my husband. You'd better hope your womb cooperates. Otherwise, your timid, rabbit-like mother won't live long. She then ordered me to find blood-activating herbs myself. If the regent prince discovered anything, she vowed she wouldn't let me off lightly. While Zhang Ma and Ninger dressed her, she ordered me to kneel all day holding a porcelain bowl above my head, forbidden to eat or drink. I knew she was deliberately tormenting me again. Before, it was because my face resembled hers that she disliked me. Now, it was because I was the one who slept in her husband's embrace. Watching her hurry off to join the prince for breakfast, a faint smile touched my lips. That teacup, I deliberately didn't dodge it. And I certainly wouldn't apply any ointment as she ordered. Sure enough, that night the prince noticed something was amiss. As he drew near, I deliberately prevented him from touching my inner garments. He looked at me, puzzled, but I only shook my head. Then, when he accidentally brushed my shoulder, I instantly grimaced in pain, my eyes welling with tears. He looked at me, his eyes filled with pity, but also a hint of scrutiny. I knew what he was thinking. The prince was a perceptive man. The sharp, spoiled Gu Mingzhu of the day transformed into a gentle, timid woman at night, as if she were a different person. Seeing my tear-streaked face, sobbing uncontrollably, his fingers brushed the bruise, gently massaging it with evident tenderness. How careless of you. Such a large bruise, what were the servants doing? I met his concerned gaze, deliberately pouting in feigned hurt. Tears silently slid down my cheeks. Then I wrapped my arms around his neck. Saying nothing, he pulled me close, whispering in my ear that if I didn't take care of myself, it would break his heart. He also told me that this morning, seeing I didn't like steamed eggs, he'd had the cook remove that dish. But he didn't know, it was Gu Mingzhu who disliked steamed eggs. Gu Ziyi, on the other hand, adored steamed eggs. The next moment, I feigned reproach, shaking my head. Meeting his tender gaze, I spoke in a weak, pitiful tone. Where did your highness hear that? This humble servant loves steamed eggs most of all. From now on, I shall have steamed eggs every morning. If you please? A flicker of doubt crossed his brow. I knew that once seeds of doubt were sown, they would sprout. But the time wasn't right yet. I didn't give him a chance to think, pressing my lips against his before drifting downward, nuzzling his neck with my nose. His hearty laughter followed as he drew closer to my neck, murmuring, "Ah, Zhu, you smell so sweet." Then he blew out the candles, pulled the brocade quilt over us, and another night of wild passion unfolded. The next day, I was met by an even more vicious and tyrannical Gu Mingzhu. Ever since marrying into the regent prince's household, her temper had grown increasingly volatile. In my previous life, after each time I fulfilled her marital duties with the prince, she would find any excuse to pinch and twist me, venting her pent-up frustration. In her eyes, I was merely a lowly concubine's daughter. The mere privilege of bearing her face before the prince was, in her view, my fortune. Truth be told, Gu Mingzhu's arrogance and the Dingwa Duke's son Zhao Gongzi's debauchery were a perfect match. They had secretly pledged themselves to each other. But after Gu Mingzhu became pregnant, young Master Zhao vanished without a trace. The mistress quietly visited the Duke of Dinghua's residence, thinking that since they were now in-laws, it might be a decent match. Instead, that debauched scoundrel didn't even dare to step outside. He even claimed he had never touched Gu Mingzhu. He had his servants relay a message. How could she single him out when she didn't even know whose child she carried? Hearing this, the mistress nearly fainted from rage. Upon returning home, she ordered servants to force-feed Gu Mingzhu a bowl of medicinal soup. That very night, the eldest sister suffered uncontrollable bleeding. She finally saw the true nature of that Zhao son. Not only did she lose the child, but she also developed chronic weakness. The physician declared her vitality damaged beyond repair, making future pregnancies impossible. Thus, when the imperial decree arrived, both the eldest sister and the mistress remembered me. Yet despite my self-sacrifice, Gu Mingzhu grew increasingly cruel toward me. In her presence, I was treated worse than a mere servant. Yet I still held value to her. That's why in my previous life, even though she hated me, she could only scheme in secret, never daring to harm me in the slightest. It wasn't until my pregnancy advanced that the regent prince, mindful of the fetus, ceased sharing my bed. Only then did her attitude toward me improve slightly. Now, seeing the shattered teacups scattered across the floor, I knew she had fallen for the regent prince. The regent prince possessed both courage and cunning, and was blessed with striking good looks. By day, the prince treated her so well that her affections had gradually drifted from the dissolute Zhao young master to him. Yet she had damaged her body, and it was I who became the one sharing the bed with the prince. This drove her utterly mad. So every night, while I was with the prince, she would sit in the servants' quarters next door, staring blankly into the night. Her once spoiled nature grew increasingly erratic, and she treated the servants even more harshly. In my previous life, one morning the prince had a sudden nightmare, and I returned a little late. She made me kneel on the floor, then produced an extremely fine embroidery needle. Gripping my hand, she drove the needle under my fingernail. I cried out in agony. Yet the more I suffered, the greater her delight. And now, just as in my past life, she took out a long embroidery needle. Seeing her venomous gaze, I feigned fear, yet my words were carefully chosen. Sister Mingzhu, last night the prince discovered the bruise on my shoulder, but I managed to deflect his questions. He is meticulous. If he notices injuries on my hands while you show none during our time together, he will surely grow suspicious. For your own sake, elder sister, please do not lose your temper. After hearing this, she glanced at Zhang Mama beside her. Zhang Mama nodded in agreement. Then, she tossed me a parting shot. Gu Zi, I'll let you off today. You'd better behave yourself. She hurried away to join the prince for breakfast. I rose from the cold stone floor, rubbing my aching knees. Then I took out a handkerchief and slowly wiped away the perfume from my neck. Gu Mingzhu, the Gu Zi of my past life was weak and let you bully her. But she is dead. The me of today will soon take your place. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and silently told myself to endure just a little longer. This nightmare would soon end. That very afternoon, news arrived that the emperor was hosting a banquet to escape the summer heat, inviting the regent prince's household to accompany him to the summer palace in Chengde. Thus, I donned a veil and became Gu Mingzhu's personal maid. To avoid Xinjiang's notice, Gu Mingzhu deliberately had Ninger apply hideously ugly eye makeup to me. She believed this would keep the prince from noticing me. Yet she failed to see the faint frown that crossed his brow when he caught the familiar scent on my skin. Soon, the emperor and empress dowager invited everyone to the main hall for ice treats. Upon the crushed ice lay fresh lychees, guanqi honey pomelos, Yongchun mandarins, and Zhaoan longans, all specialties of southern Fujian, delivered by 800 Li Express tribute. As the guests savored the fresh lychees, palace attendants fanned them while below the stage. The sound of silk and bamboo instruments filled the air. Dancers swayed gracefully, their waists undulating. Outside, the heat was unbearable. Yet inside, a cool breeze lingered, truly a royal summer retreat. After the dance concluded, the Empress Dowager, the Emperor, and the others showered praise upon the performers. The Empress Dowager, ever benevolent, had several handfuls of golden melon seeds brought forth to reward the dancers and musicians. At that moment, the Empress Dowager noticed me. She studied me from head to toe, then spoke in a soft, lingering voice. It seems to me this veiled maid bears a striking resemblance. Do you not find her eyes and brow remarkably similar to those of Princess Consort Gu? Why not remove the veil and let us all see her true face? At these words, a flicker of panic crossed Gu Mingzhu's eyes. She covered her mouth with a handkerchief, shot me a quick glance, then cleared her throat softly. Your Majesty, this servant is my personal maid. I never intended for her to wear a veil, but she suffered a terrible burn to her face in childhood, leaving a dreadful scar. That is why she must conceal her face. I too feel we share a resemblance in our eyes and brows, and have always regarded her as a younger sister since childhood. Still, on this fine day of summer retreat, it would be best for her to keep it covered. Should she frighten the guests, the blame would fall heavily upon me. Her explanation was sound and reasonable, and the Empress Dowager naturally agreed. After all, she was the Empress Dowager, the sovereign of the realm. Seeing our shared features, she was merely curious. She was merely a maid. The Empress Dowager paid no mind to the scar on her face. But I caught the Regent Prince's face darken instantly beside her. A plan formed in my mind. I felt a quiet thrill. It seemed the opportunity I'd sought for so long was finally here today. Gu Mingzhu thought she'd escaped unscathed and breathed a sigh of relief. Then, another group of dancers took the stage as celestial music began to play. Taking advantage of the crowd's distraction, she discreetly signaled me to hurry down. Beneath my veil, the corners of my mouth lifted in a faint, mocking smile before I slipped away unnoticed. No sooner had I reached the secluded bamboo grove than a tall figure clad in dark robes followed. Before I could discern who it was, he yanked off my veil. It was the prince, staring at my face. His eyes held shock, yet also a hint of expectation. Next, he snatched my handkerchief and wiped away my heavy eye makeup. Drawing near my neck, he caught the familiar scent of orange blossom balm. Then, his clear voice rang out, tinged with anger. You are the woman who sleeps with this prince every night. So then, who was in the main hall? This prince has long wondered why the Gu Mingzhu of day and the Gu Mingzhu of night differ so greatly. Even if you share the same face, the scent on your skin, your food preferences, the tone of your voice, there are always subtle differences. The wounds on your body always vanish during the day, only to reappear so clearly at night. When I look at you, a wave of pity stirs in my heart. Yet when I face the daytime Gu Mingzhu, my heart feels utterly empty, devoid of anything, completely uninterested. Yesterday, I saw her punish a servant with such a fierce tone, utterly unlike the person I saw on our wedding night. That's when my suspicions arose. So I asked her if she remembered the poem you recited for me that night. She froze and said she'd forgotten. Having accompanied the late emperor through countless life and death situations, I've honed an eagle eye. Such petty tricks won't fool me. So tell me, who are you? And what happened? I quietly shed tears, nestling into his embrace and shaking my head silently. His impatience grew. He grabbed my hand, determined to take me to the main hall and confront Gu Mingzhu before everyone. I clutched his hand tightly, tears welling in my eyes as I shook my head fearfully. Yet inside, I was already bursting with joy. This was the first step of the plan. He didn't know that today I had deliberately lured him here, As I withdrew, I knew his gaze was fixed on me. So, in the instant before leaving, I pretended to casually lift my veil. He saw the familiar profile, and so I knew he would follow. After all, the Gu Mingzhu of day and the Gu Mingzhu of night were not the same person. Discovering the secret himself would be infinitely more shocking than having it revealed by others. Seeing my silence, he grabbed my hand and began pulling me toward the main hall. To prevent him from disrupting my plan, I wrenched my hand free. Then, with a thud, I knelt before him. I told him everything, word for word. Only then did he understand why I had forbidden him from informing the Emperor and the Empress Dowager. After all, this affair was too absurd. If it were to spread, it would surely bring no benefit to the Regent Prince's mansion. Moreover, we didn't know the Emperor and Empress Dowager's intentions. If the thunder was loud but the rain light, failing to strike them decisively, it might instead alert the enemy. More crucially, my mother remained in their hands. Xinjiangzi gazed at me, took my hand, and spoke in a deep voice. I never imagined a man of honor would endure such injustice against his own wife without protest. Rest assured, I have a plan. Tomorrow, simply stay by my side. Then he leaned close and whispered a few words in my ear. That evening, Mother Zhang bathed and dressed me before escorting me to the prince's chambers. I vividly recall Gu Mingzhu's venomous face before I left. She glared at me, digging her nails into my arm as I passed. Then, just as I closed the door, she seemed to remember something. She ordered me to report every detail of my interactions with the prince from now on. She also mentioned that the prince had asked her a poem question a few days ago, which she couldn't answer. This time, she'd let me off. As she left, she warned me to find a way to conceive quickly, or I'd never see my mother again. I nodded obediently and slowly closed the door. But the moment I turned away, a cold smile touched my lips. Gu Mingzhu. Oh, Gu Mingzhu. After tonight, you'll never lord over me again. The next morning, Gu Mingzhu waited and waited, but I didn't return. Instead, Zhang Ma rushed over in a panic. Seeing her hesitate to speak, Gu Mingzhu flung a teacup to the floor. Zhang Ma trembled in fear before finally dropping to her knees with a thud. Stammering, Miss C is accompanying His Royal Highness for his evening meal. Gu Mingzhu's eyes widened instantly, her face frozen in disbelief. She stormed out the door, but the moment she opened it, she retreated like a turtle withdrawing into its shell. Yes. What right did she have to go now? As Gu Mingzhu? But in the prince's eyes, Gu Mingzhu was currently dining with him. She spotted the veil in the corner. So, gritting her teeth, she donned the veil and headed straight for the prince's chambers. At that moment, the prince was tenderly feeding me steamed eggs. We were discussing a passage from Mencius. A lady must first disgrace herself before others will disgrace her. A family must first destroy itself before others will destroy it. A state must first attack itself before others will attack it. After hearing my explanation, he nodded approvingly, then affectionately ruffled my hair. A flash of venom crossed Gu Mingzhu's eyes as she silently stood behind me. I knew she was waiting for an opportunity to remind me it was time to switch back. But Gu Mingzhu, you won't get that chance anymore. I feigned anger and scolded her loudly. What servant is this? So ignorant of etiquette? How dare you not bow to your master? The prince beside me remained expressionless. Adding a fresh, marinated pigeon egg to my bowl, he smiled warmly and said, "This is delicious. Eat more." Then he picked up a handkerchief and gently dabbed my lips. At that moment, Gu Mingzhu stood frozen, watching the prince treat me with such tenderness. She was stunned. In her memory, she had only seen the prince's gentle, water-like demeanor during the few days before she married into the household. After that, whenever the prince spoke to her, he would excuse himself, claiming to be busy. The next moment, noticing her dazed expression, the prince flung his chopsticks down. Insolent servant! Does the consort's gentle nature make you forget this mansion has only one mistress? All the palace attendants gasped and immediately knelt. Seeing this, Gu Mingzhu could only reluctantly kneel, awkwardly performing a formal bow toward me. Well, she was so accustomed to being the mistress, how could she possibly remember the proper way for a servant to bow? Then, the prince gave a soft, cold snort. Such an ignorant servant need not attend us anymore. She shall remain in the laundry room. From now on, all the clothes in this entire mansion shall be made by this maid. As for now, lock her up. I happen to have some free time soon. After leaving the summer resort, I shall accompany the princess consort back to the Gu residence to properly observe the lady and master of the Gu household. Before Gu Mingzhu could beg for mercy, 2 palace attendants dragged her away. Ning'er and Zhang Mama were also locked up. The days at the summer resort ended swiftly. The carriage carrying the prince and myself now stood before the Gu residence. The matriarch was startled upon seeing me. Though I wore brocades and silk, my hair adorned with jewels and pearls, the gaze I cast upon her was utterly cold. She realized I was not Gu Mingzhu, but Gu Zi. Her daughter, having just returned to the laundry room, had already caused trouble. Her attempt to sneak out had failed, and now she was bound in the woodshed. Ning'er and Zhang Ma, her attendants, were also tied up and gagged. They could no longer send word to the Gu residence. Noticing the flicker of confusion in her eyes, I let out a soft laugh. Then, clasping the prince's hand, I spoke slowly. Mother, why aren't you pleased to see Mingzhu back? Could it be that your younger sister has upset you? Oh, look at Mingzhu's memory. Your sister didn't work diligently enough in the prince's mansion, so she was sent to the laundry room. She'll have to wash countless clothes from now on. Summer is bearable, but come winter, tsk, her hands will likely be ruined. Hearing this, she suppressed her anger, her gaze flashing a momentary venom at me. She finally realized I had usurped Gu Mingzhu's identity. Indeed, in my previous life, my mother and I were weak and easily bullied. In her eyes, we would never dare betray them. In her fury, she forgot my current status. She raised her hand, ready to slap me. But the next second, her wrist was seized by the prince. He gripped her hand so tightly she cried out in pain before he released her. I sipped my tea leisurely. It was indeed the finest Prerine Longjing. Back at the Gu residence, I'd never tasted tea this exquisite. Setting down my teacup, my voice was icy, laced with resolve. Since Mingzhu has married out, Mother clearly regards her as an outsider now. Then I shall simply cease returning to the Gu residence. However, Father's concubine, Lady Feng, treated me exceptionally well in my childhood. She excels at embroidery, and I was hoping she might make me a few garments. The mistress looked at me. Clever as she was, she knew I had returned today for my mother. Once I brought my mother back, she would lose all leverage and trump cards. But as she gazed at the cold-faced prince and the prince's secret guard waiting outside, she knew it was already too late. She discreetly signaled to a nearby matron. Before the matron could leave, I slammed the door shut. I knew the mistress intended to silence my mother, but I wouldn't give her that chance. Soon, the carriage returning to the Prince of Huiwang's residence carried one more person. My mother. Xinjiangji had prepared a nearby courtyard for her, complete with numerous maids and guards. With Mother staying here, I felt at ease. Next, it was time to deal with Gu Mingzhu. But when I reached the woodshed, it was empty. The maids and guards who should have been stationed outside lay drugged and bound within. It turned out that during our journey back, the mistress had dispatched several martial artists skilled in combat to rush to the mansion. Their agility was exceptional, they had slipped into the mansion unnoticed. They then bribed a kitchen servant with several dozen taels of gold to uncover Gu Mingzhu's location. They entered the woodshed, seizing the moment to knock out the guards and maids. Gu Mingzhu and the others hid in rice and water vats prepared by the servant. The kitchen boy pretended to leave the estate to buy ingredients, pulling a cart out of the prince's residence. Soon, the kitchen servant who helped them escape was found. They found him preparing to flee the city. Gazing at this traitorous servant, the prince personally seized a whip. Several lashes later, the man collapsed unconscious. Finally, the prince tossed aside the whip, his face twisted with disgust. My estate has no use for traitors. Leave him on the street to fend for himself. Afterward, he came to the bedchamber. Seeing me deep in thought, he clasped my hand tightly. It's all my fault. I never imagined the Gu family matriarch possessed such cunning. My princess has suffered wrongs. Meeting his dark eyes, I gently kissed his cheek. No need for formalities. My lord, I'm already profoundly grateful you rescued my mother. Still, Gu Mingzhu's escape leaves me uneasy. They won't give up easily, more trouble is surely brewing. Please be vigilant in all matters. After all, the vicious image of Gu Mingzhu poisoning my wine and slashing my cheek in my past life remains etched in my mind. I know her viciousness better than anyone. Gu Mingzhu, rest assured, you may escape for now. But not forever. You won't slip through my grasp. He nodded, wrapping his arm around my shoulder and pulling me close. The next moment, an inexplicable wave of nausea surged in my stomach, startling him into ordering servants to fetch the physician. I lifted my eyes to meet Shinzhanji's gaze, filled with anticipation. Sure enough, after taking my pulse, the physician delivered good news. I was with child. Congratulations, Your Highness and consort. You are 2 months pregnant. The physician's words had barely left his lips when a pair of warm, large hands settled on my shoulders. He looked at me, his face radiant with joy. Mingzhu, we have a child. Noticing a flicker in my eyes, he suddenly realized his slip and quickly apologized. Forgive me, Z. I've simply grown accustomed to calling you Mingzhu. If you dislike it, I'll call you Z. I chuckled softly, shaking my head, and gently tapped his nose. My lord jests. To the world, I am Gu Mingzhu. You needn't apologize. From now on, call me Mingzhu. Reborn into this life, I would cling fiercely to my status as both the Gu family's heiress and the princess consort. After all, the imperial decree had specifically betrothed Xinjiang and Gu Mingzhu. I dared not take upon myself the crime of defying the emperor's will. Soon, the prince informed me that the southern barbarians had undergone a dynastic change. Their old king had died, and the new ruler had immediately invaded our borders. The young emperor had only recently ascended the throne. The old ministers had abdicated due to his youth, and there were scarcely any capable generals left. Thus, the urgent mission to repel the southern barbarians fell upon the regent prince. The day before his departure, I clasped his hand tightly, assuring him to go with peace of mind. I vowed to manage the prince's residence with utmost order and efficiency, awaiting his triumphant return. Soon after, Xinjiangzi donned his armor and left the residence, glancing back every few steps as he journeyed toward the frontier. Under my stewardship, the prince's residence operated with flawless precision, indistinguishable from its state during his presence. A month swiftly passed. Each day, I dispatched servants to secretly visit the Gu residence, gathering intelligence. I knew Gu Mingzhu could only go to the Gu residence. Yet, after a month of inquiries, the servants reported they hadn't seen Gu Mingzhu. Instead, they had seen the Prince of Anping entering and leaving the Gu residence several times. Hearing this, I couldn't help but ponder silently. The Prince of Anping? He was the eldest son of the late emperor, but his haughty nature had alienated many court officials. To amass wealth, he had secretly embezzled military funds and engaged in numerous corrupt practices like selling official positions. Rumor even had it that a censor had impeached him, accusing him of maintaining close ties with several tribal chieftains from the southern barbarian lands. However, the evidence proved insufficient, and the matter was dismissed as a baseless accusation. Seeing his utter incompetence, the late emperor abandoned any hope of him ascending the throne. Before his passing, he directly named his youngest son as crown prince, entrusting state affairs to his most trusted younger brother, the regent prince. It seems Gu Mingzhu and the mistress secretly contacted Prince Onping, hoping to turn the tables. I wore a sneer and shook my head lightly. Now, having discovered my bold defection, they realize they've offended the regent prince and know their days are numbered. They seek a new patron. But I never imagined they'd be so foolish as to choose the unreliable Prince Onping. Truly, they'll trust any scoundrel. It seems desperation has truly clouded their judgment, like cornered dogs. They've lost their minds. My brow furrowed as a plan crystallized in my mind. A plan to take them all down at once. I then wrote 2 secret letters. One was slipped discreetly into the imperial palace. The other was sent by express courier to Xinjiangji's military camp at the frontier. Another month passed, and my pregnancy began to show. Today, the royal decree from His Majesty arrived at the prince's residence. But before the imperial messenger could finish reading the decree, I collapsed unconscious. Xinjiangji had fallen in battle. It turned out the southern barbarians had feigned peace to secure a temporary truce. Yet the day before negotiations were set to begin, they tore up the ceasefire agreement. Under cover of night, they launched an invasion against Xinjiangji's encampment. As if foreknowing his location, they charged straight for his tent. After a fierce battle, outnumbered and overwhelmed, Xinjiangji was struck down by multiple swords and died. I wept uncontrollably, and the entire prince's residence was plunged into mourning. The imperial messenger urged me to compose myself, announcing that the Empress Dowager, moved by Xinjiang's loyalty, had bestowed upon me the title of first-rank noble consort. As for the child within me, if a young prince, he would inherit all the prince's titles and stipends. If a young princess, she would be titled Princess Anshua, granted fiefs and estates. I wept uncontrollably, forcing myself to thank the eunuch through my grief. Soon, the entire mansion was draped in mourning white. Incense burners and memorial tablets stood ready, awaiting only Xinjiangji's body to be brought back for burial. Everyone in the mansion knew that after Xinjiangji's accident, I fell gravely ill. I lay in bed day after day, drinking bowl after bowl of medicinal broth. Maids and servants gathered outside my chambers daily, watching me closely, fearful that my grief might overwhelm me and cause further harm. News of my prolonged illness even reached the Empress Dowager's ears. Knowing Xinjiangji had died defending the nation, she decreed that upon his body's return, he was to be buried with the highest honors befitting a prince. Concerned that my grief at the prince's residence might overwhelm me, she summoned me to the palace early, instructing me to rest and nurture my pregnancy within its walls. Soon, the day arrived for Xinjiang's body to be returned to the capital. At the funeral, the young emperor and the Empress Dowager, unfamiliar with state affairs, were deeply grieved by the loss of such a capable regent. Beside me lay Xinjiang's coffin. I knelt upon it, tears streaming down my face. Following protocol, the emperor first presided over the grand funeral rites in the court, followed by the memorial banquet. After the banquet, the coffin would be transported to the prince's mansion, then onward to the royal tomb. Yet at this very memorial banquet, Prince Onping, leading a contingent of soldiers, dared to enter the grand hall armed with swords and daggers. The Empress Dowager's face darkened instantly, her voice cold as ice. "How dare you, Prince Onping? Swords and blades are forbidden within the palace halls. This is an ancestral decree. Do you not know this is a capital offense? Prince Onping shot the Empress Dowager a contemptuous glance. His tone sharp. I am merely protecting the Emperor and your Majesty. After all, the Emperor is but a 6-year-old child. How could he possibly understand state affairs? And you, your Majesty, are merely a woman. How could you possibly understand the governance of a nation? Today, I merely wish to make your Majesty see the reality of the situation. With that, the soldiers behind him surged forward, surrounding the court ministers, hands resting on their sword scabbards. They stood poised to take the ministers' heads at the Prince of Onping's command. At that moment, I spotted Gu Mingzhu behind the Prince of Onping, though disguised as a guard and wearing a mask. The moment the guards in front of her dispersed, I recognized those eyes so similar to mine. The young emperor, terrified, threw himself into the Empress Dowager's arms, her face gradually turning pale. Watching the court ministers exchange glances, I stood tall and strode forward. Then, fixing my gaze squarely on the pot-bellied Prince Onping, my voice rang out loud and clear. Prince Onping, this princess has always held you in respect, remembering you were personally enfeoffed by the late emperor. Yet now, you dare enter the palace armed with blades during the funeral procession. How can this not arouse suspicion? Could it be that your highness, seeing the Empress Dowager and the emperor's influence waning, has resolved to force a coup and rebel? Prince Onping, you dare plot rebellion. The words rang out with force. And immediately, the ministers began whispering among themselves. I knew they had seen the Prince of Onping enter the hall armed and sensed conflict was inevitable. Yet none dared speak it aloud. My words, however, planted the accusation firmly in their minds, branding him a rebel. The Prince of Onping stroked his beard, his gaze fixed on me, eyes flashing with cold contempt. Then his plump lips parted. Princess Consort Gu. Such words are most displeasing to this prince. I am no rebel. I merely see the young emperor as too immature to shoulder great responsibilities. I simply wish to prevent our Shin dynasty from falling into the hands of imperial in-laws. With that, he shot a defiant glance at the Empress Dowager. Hearing this, the Empress Dowager flushed crimson with fury. Pointing angrily at the Prince of Onping, she thundered, "You wretch! Prince Onping, I never imagined you harbored such treasonous ambitions. How can you face the late emperor?" Prince Onping then fixed his gaze on the Empress Dowager and the young emperor. As if hearing the most amusing jest, he burst into loud laughter in the imperial court. So what if I have? When did His Majesty ever show me the slightest affection? Now, without Xinjiangji, isn't this empire already mine for the taking? Seize him! Before Prince Onping could finish, a voice as clear as heavenly music cut through the air. Prince Onping, plotting rebellion today without so much as informing your imperial uncle, how utterly audacious. Xinjiangzi had returned. Seeing his face, my tears fell instantly. After 2 months apart, he had darkened and grown thinner, yet his brow and eyes held even greater resolve. And a small scar graced his left temple, adding to his heroic bearing. Prince Onping gasped sharply, his eyes nearly popping out of his head. Xinjiangji? You? Weren't you dead? How are you here? Xinjiangji pretended not to hear, walking straight to me. He then draped his outer robe over my shoulders, his eyes filled with tenderness. My lady, the wind is strong here. Don't catch cold. Only then did he turn to face Prince Onping, his tone dripping with contempt. How dare you? By bloodline, I am still your imperial uncle. Utterly vulgar, Prince Onping. You are truly beyond redemption. Moreover, seeing me die at the hands of barbarians seemed to please you greatly? Today, your wolfish ambitions are laid bare. Prince Onping, This imperial throne was never meant for your covetous grasp. If you turn back now, I might spare your life." A flicker of panic crossed Prince Onping's eyes as he took an incredulous step back. Then, gazing at the coffin beside him, he swung his sword to cleave it open. Inside, it was stuffed with stones. His face grew icy, his voice venomous. "This empire was always meant to be mine. I blame my own mercy for not killing the emperor long ago. Now, no one can stand in my way. Soldiers, charge!" But in the next instant, arrows whistled from the palace walls, piercing Prince Onping like a sieve. Yes, Shinzhanzi's assassination was staged, a play orchestrated by the Empress Dowager NS. When my men reported Prince Onping had visited the Gu residence multiple times, I knew immediately that the mistress in Gu Mingzhu had already found a new patron. Her willingness to play along with this charade proved she never truly loved Shinzhanzi, she coveted only his status and power. The moment she realized she could gain nothing more from him, she secured a new patron. That patron was the Prince of Onping. At that moment, I dispatched a carrier pigeon to Shinzhanji, warning him that the Gu family had found the Prince of Onping and urging him to be vigilant in the barracks. I had also informed the Empress Dowager well in advance. Simultaneously, I had servants infiltrate the Prince of Onping's residence, posing as the newly arrived attendants. They did not disappoint, secretly retrieving several letters exchanged between the Prince of Onping and the Gu family. These letters contained irrefutable evidence, proof of collusion with foreign enemies, treason, and rebellion. The correspondence revealed Prince Onping had re-established and maintained close ties with former barbarian factions, exchanging state secrets between nations. He even used spies within the military camp to gather intelligence on Shinzhanji's forces. This information was then passed to the southern barbarian armies, enabling them to launch a surprise attack on Shinzhanji's encampment. Prince Onping had promised them that if he ascended the throne, the barbarian tribes would receive 10,000 taels of gold, 10,000 horses, and 1,000 women. Upon seeing these secret letters, I conceived the strategy of going with the flow. After all, only Shinzhanzi-treated death could lure out this great serpent. Prince Onping. The Empress Dowager listened and silently nodded in agreement. To ensure my safety, she brought me into the palace. She had heard rumors of Prince Onping's treasonous intentions, but when concrete evidence arrived in the form of these letters, she could no longer deny it. She understood her son was still young. If she showed even a shred of mercy and failed to clear the path for him, his throne would remain precarious forever. Thus, at her behest, I dispatched a carrier pigeon to Shinzhanji, revealing this plan. He did not disappoint, using the mouths of barbarian prisoners to relay false intelligence to Prince Onping. Therefore, today's ostensible burial for Shinzhanji was, in truth, a banquet of treachery for Prince Onping and the Gu family mother and daughter. I clasped Shinzhanji's hand tightly, offering him a relieved smile. Thankfully, everything succeeded. It was worth all the effort, faking grief and squeezing out tears for so long after receiving that imperial edict. Just then, my peripheral vision caught Gu Mingzhu attempting to slip away. Seeing her coup attempt fail, Gu Mingzhu sought to slip away unnoticed in the crowd. But I denied her that chance, pointing directly at her. The next instant, an arrow pierced Gu Mingzhu's shoulder. All was settled. In the dungeon of the royal mansion, I wore the vibrant attire of a princess consort. My lips painted a vivid, alluring red. A palace attendant stood beside me, hands cradling a golden-laid jade tray. Upon it rested an exquisite wine cup, filled with poisoned liquor. Beside the cup lay a sharp dagger. At that moment, Gu Mingzhu and her mother were gagged and bound to pillars. As I watched the venom in their eyes, I placed my hands over my belly and smiled faintly. I had gained considerable weight now, a far cry from the emaciated frame I'd possessed at the Gu residence. This new figure truly befitted a princess consort. Their eyes locked onto my belly, filled with murderous intent. I burst out laughing, then spoke slowly. I know you must hate me intensely. After all, I remember every word my elder sister uttered when she killed me in my previous life. Watching their eyes widen abruptly, I smiled indifferently. But I truly don't understand. From beginning to end, all my mother and I ever wanted was peace and smooth sailing. Why did you treat us so harshly? I only regret that father died too soon, unable to protect us. The mistress before me forcefully spat out the handkerchief in her mouth, her voice rising like a venomous snake. Plotting all this time, yet still losing in the end. Ha! You wanted peace and ease? But when did your father ever cherish or love me? Though I held the title of Gu family matriarch, he spoke of your mother daily. And me? Ming Zhu? Did he ever care about us? Hearing this, my blood boiled. So it was her. Tears streamed down my face as childhood memories flooded back, father holding my hand, patiently teaching me to write. I knew father. He was never the kind of man the mistress described, favoring a concubine over his wife. Father always taught us to honor the mistress, warning us never to harbor thoughts of rivalry within the household. It was her own excessive jealousy that clouded her mind. Closing my eyes, 2 clear tears fell, staring at the 2 mad souls before me. I paced forward, my eyes crimson. I had planned to send you both on your way swiftly. The poisoned wine and dagger were ready. But I've changed my mind. After all, I'm carrying a child now and cannot bear the sight of blood. So instead, I'll give you a surprise. Then, I clapped my hands. A familiar figure limped into the room. It was the young master of the Zhao family from the Duke of Ding's mansion, Gu Mingzhu's former lover. Watching the stunned mother and daughter, I wiped away my tears, my eyes cold. You probably didn't know, but the Duke of Ding secretly colluded with Prince Onping. He thought that once the prince became emperor, he'd get a share of the spoils. Too bad. Now the Dingwa Marquis' mansion has fallen too. But the regent prince is merciful and spared young Master Zhao's life. However, the idea to collude with Prince Onping originated with you too. After the Zhao family fell from grace, young Master Zhao even had his leg broken by enemies. Tell me, on whom do you think he'll vent his anger? Seeing the 2 turn ashen, the mistress quickly pleaded loudly for mercy. Zhao, no longer the man of wealth and honor, now clad in coarse hemp robes, limped forward, his face dark and sinister. Then, he raised the whip in his hand with a vicious flick. The next second, a heart-wrenching scream pierced the air. I smiled with satisfaction and slowly closed the door. A month later, Master Zhao presented 2 boxes. Each contained a human pig. Both inside had long since lost their limbs, their facial features mangled beyond recognition. I tossed Master Zhao a handful of gold coins. He hastily knelt to express his gratitude, gazing at the inhuman, ghostly forms within the boxes. I covered my mouth and chuckled softly. What filthy things are these? Throw them into the latrine at once. Watching the servant take the boxes to the changing room's outhouse, I beamed with radiant joy. I then instructed the servants to prepare the prince's favorite dish, squirrel-shaped mandarin fish, as he would be returning from court immediately. I touched my increasingly prominent belly, my eyes brimming with blissful joy. Let me nurture soaring wings, and play with clear melodies at will. This lifetime, it is mine to be the most dazzling pearl. The end.